Guess who's here again? Dr. Wendy Ward, Associate Provost, Professor with tenure in the Department of Pediatrics. Specialty is pediatric psychology. She's the Director of Interprofessional Faculty Development at the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. I always want to say center. Say it for us, Wendy. UAMS is
University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences.
Dr. Wendy Ward is also a coach with the International Coaching Federation. She has been on the podcast almost a dozen times now. And she's here today to talk about something really interesting and something that's important. So let's just get right into it. As usual, Wendy, thanks again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm here to talk about interprofessional collaboration, skills for success. How do we operate with each other? What are the best practices for building a team or being a part of a team? That could be a team science. There's a lot of research on evidence-based for interdisciplinary team science. It also could be a collaborative care team or a team in an educational zone. And I'm bringing the lens a bit of interprofessional education. And a lot of people, and I think I even have a podcast on IPE and how we view that here at UAMS. A lot of people think about that as an accreditation requirement to build team skills in medical students. There's also some accreditation requirements, ACGME for the residents. But it's actually much broader than that. We really want to connect effective team-based practice with healthcare outcomes, or in the research arena with getting the bigger grants. There's a lot of literature that says NIH is funding the more unique collaborations among disciplines that don't historically work well together. They are really jazzed about that because they feel like different perspectives solve difficult problems much more effectively than perspectives. Mm-hmm. So, and the same is true in healthcare, right? A complex, challenging case can be better solved by an interdisciplinary team than by any one practitioner. So,
yeah, Wendy, can we pause here? Because I've had a couple questions that were kind of whispered to me in the back of a seminar room, like, what is all this team science? I don't get it. It's almost kind of like saying, if you're a person, you need to talk to other people, meaning like, duh, isn't that like all what we do anyway? And it was kind of like that vein of a question. And I kind of looked at the person, I'm like, okay, yeah, but it was kind of like my kind of brain went, yeah, but because the question implied that it's like it is what it is, like a reverse causal thing of like, of course that's what we do with team science. And then afterwards, I'm like, this has come about from my understanding that there actually were these beings, these creatures, like I don't call them creatures, but like they were like standalone people who just would work their whole career by themselves.
yes.
Maybe a couple mentees, but they were like mini me's. But that used to be a thing, that you'd have the lone cowboy, the lone cowgirl who was just a one-person show, just knocking out of the park. And I can name you right now like 5 or 6 people I remember when I was a postdoc who were like, whoa, they're the famous, they're that woman, there's that guy, who just sit there and they just publish and got tons and tons of grants and seemingly to work in their own little microcosm. And so
absolutely,
I think that's what, maybe the younger generation, like they don't know that used to be a thing. Yes. And there were rotary phones too. So like maybe they just don't know because that's all they've known is team science. But can you give us an example when you just said like, oh, NIH and funders and DOD and AHR, whatever, they love interdisciplinary. What do you really mean by interdisciplinary? Because it's not just getting the OT, the PT, and the surgeon and the nurse practitioner. It's not that necessarily that kind of team of like who's your care team. I'll be your your nurse for the day, Kim. It's not necessarily that kind of a team, is it? What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So in the not too distant past, there was an approach of science where you were in your discipline and you had a lab focused on some aspect within your discipline, and you trained graduate students and postdocs to be in your discipline in that specific arena, right? And they would go to other institutions and extend their work, and they would start to find their own niche within that topic. Now, that worked really well for many years. We were learning a lot as in terms of the bulk of scientific knowledge. We were learning a lot, and we were answering questions, and we were discovering. But what we found is as our knowledge grew, our questions became more nuanced. And a unidiscipline, like one discipline, tackling that question is not as effective as having a partner. So you first started to see partners within the same discipline, but with different niches, right? Within that discipline. And then that grew to having different disciplines partner together. The hard sciences, I use that team a bit facetiously because I am from what you might call a quote soft science, and I don't find the understanding of human dynamics soft in any way. So I'm using a little facetiously, but the technically hard scientists started doing that earlier than the others, for sure. And maybe a bit their wave of going into team-based work and research ahead of the collaborative care wave. So they may be at different time points in building those team skills, but the facts are true. NIH tracks its grants and who achieves them. And the more unique and established interdisciplinary teams are getting the bigger grants, period. It's very hard to get the large ones in a single discipline team or individual. So you absolutely need to have these skills. What's different, I think, is trying to think about what it takes to be a good team member or a good team leader. So PIs are the team leaders, the co-Is, the team members. And those are really important skills. And they are the same skills that it takes to work as a good team member or good team leader in the clinical care environment. In fact, we've spent decades in the social sciences understanding group dynamics. And more recently, the healthcare professions and the interdisciplinary scientists have come together to talk about what those skills are. And they fall under 4 domains. Typically, the first is understanding roles and responsibilities. So I may understand my discipline, if I'm a scientist, what my discipline knows, the scope of that knowledge, and I feel comfortable and confident in my expertise and in my arena and in my discipline. But I may not know the other discipline's scope of knowledge. And you have to get to know that. That's the building relationships part. You have to get to understand what they do know about. And there are new disciplines popping up all the time. Think about artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
How much
that?
Right. How much do I know about artificial intelligence and how it's built? Nada.
Right. But Wendy, wait, Wendy. So you're so spot on. Perfect. My brain was exactly going there, and I was reflecting on some episodes I've done with some artificial intelligence, really super smart bioinformatics, machine learning, large language model people. How do I understand their roles and responsibilities, Wendy, if I don't even understand what they're saying? So that's why, to me, I'm thinking, I'd love to have a team that includes these bioinformatics people, these data wonks, these AI people, these biomechanical engineers. I don't understand the words that are coming out of their mouth. I mean, it's so hard to they'll say, well, what are the blah, blah, blah attributes? I'm like, I don't know what do you mean attributes? Oh, you mean a variable? Well, it's an attribute. I'm like, okay, so let's just make sure we understand that this word means, okay, so now we have a synonym for this. So I almost feel like I need a legend on the wall of when they say that in our world, that means this. And then you feel like, are we aliens? And then the people who are like me, we look at each other like, have I just lost my mind here? Can you please help translate what I just said? And then my partner will be like, what Kim's trying to say is, and they're like, oh, you mean that? Or I don't know if I mean that. What do you say? It's so hard and it takes so long, Wendy.
It does. And I'll tell you, it is shocking to me how much jargon we use in discipline within discipline jargon as opposed to understandable across discipline as scientists. Same is true for healthcare professionals.
And
They use
acronyms
different terms and acronyms or the
all the
same
time.
concept,
Yes.
which leads to medical errors in the healthcare world and leads to gaps in understanding and
Yes.
missteps in research if we don't de-jargon our communications. So
And
rather than a
annoyance.
legend, I'd argue for plain language,
And
right?
annoyance. My annoyance goes up every time I meet someone and they go, well, I was working on the ABC with the XRQ and the XYZ and the one, superscript A. And then they look at me and go, we use a lot of acronyms. And I'm like, so do we. But when I communicate with another human being, I'm not going to make an
Right.
assumption that you know what that means.
Right.
In words. Then they'll say the words and I'll go, oh, I still don't know what that means.
So that's true in two ways when you're talking about interdisciplinary science or healthcare professions, communication verbally, and then what we're putting in our writing. So to understand if you're co-writing a grant, putting in lots of jargon is going to confuse the reviewers who may, at this point, the NIH review teams are interdisciplinary as well. So you're going to confuse them as well as your co-writers. So you have to fundamentally agree upon which verbs we're going to use or which nouns we're going to use for these concepts at the outset of the writing. The same is true in healthcare notes. If you're writing your note and you're using a lot of profession-specific jargon, the other team members will not understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So more plain language is really important in our communication with each other. I will say, while we're on the topic of communication, understanding the nuances, navigating differences of opinion, having good conflict resolution skills, the ability to read someone's nonverbals and understand that they may or may not be agreeing with you based on those nonverbals and editing your approach in midstream are really sophisticated nuances that are needed to lead a team. Absolutely. So it's not just what we say or how we write, but it's also how we are social individuals and our nonverbal communications as well.
That's so important, Wendy Ward, to underscore the emotional intelligence aspect of that. Yes, for my purposes, it is efficient for me to speak in jargon and acronyms and abbreviations, and at the risk of not only confusing things, but literally, the annoyance is a real thing, because if you're not aware of that, you run the risk of damaging relationships. Because I find, well, this is now just I'm personalizing this, I don't want to make somebody feel stupid, or I don't want to do the proverbial eye roll. Back to your big on your nonverbal communications, like, again, Kim, like we told you, the XYZ stands for something, something. And I'm thinking, oh, pardon me. So you don't want to, it's beyond just getting things confusing that could be dangerous, but on the personal level of you're making someone, you're underlining that they are an outsider. And the outsider means you're not one of us. You are other, and you might be an outsider other who's pretty dumb because you don't get it. Without recognizing, without using my emotional intelligence that, geez, if this were reversed and I were the outsider and they're speaking to me and I wouldn't know, how would that make me feel? So that is so important. I'm so glad that you said that. So this whole roles, responsibilities, and seeking to understand, listening to understand, not just to hear, goes beyond just getting the measurements right. It's a deeper connectedness, and it's all about relationships. So I'll stop.
Yes. No. This is a really important piece, because one of the third categories of skills in being a really positive contributor to team functioning is understanding the values and helping create a culture on a team. Every member of that team helps create it or undermine it, period. So thinking through, are we a team that's going to mutually respect each other and our knowledge base? We're all different, but everybody's here for a reason. We serve an important component to on a research team, to the understanding of the questions that we want to ask, to the writing of the grant, to the resources we need to support the work if we get funded. And so creating a culture with our communication style, with our emotional intelligence, with our understanding of each person's roles and responsibilities, that has mutual respect, shared decision-making is absolutely critical for the successful outcome of a team. Does not matter if it's research or in the clinical zone. In fact, I did a research study with some graduate students from different disciplines and professions, looking at the ethical codes, and the different professions have a degree of overlap. Of course, there's a degree of overlap in the ethical codes. But it might surprise you to know that the ethical codes are not uniform in some ways. And so there are different perspectives on key issues. And being able to understand that there may be an ethical conundrum for one member of your team in approaching this patient, or one member of your team in approaching this grant writing that is not present for other members, and to respect and discuss it in a way that's collegial and positive is really important in moving through it, to working through that problem or concern. So the developing a shared sense of values on the team, navigating ethical conundrums, and really creating this positive work culture is absolutely critical, regardless of the team's context.
Yeah. Good. So did you just say the third something? Because if so, I missed the second one. So so the number one was understanding roles and responsibilities of the team.
Yes. And the second one was communication.
Right. Communication. And then the third is understanding values and creating a culture.
Yes.
See, I got so excited. I missed number two. I'm like, wait, she just said three. And I remember purposely with my ex-husband, and he listens to this. So shout out to you. I'd say, just to see if he was paying attention, I'd be like, well, la, 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 because A, da, 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 and two, X, Y, and then C, and he's like, you do realize you just said A and two and C. I'm like, I did. I just tried to make sure you're
listening.
To me. A, two, C, or I'd say one, B, three. And he looked at me like, wait, are you? I'm like, I'm just making sure you're following along. And so I did the same thing. I'm like, did she just say three? Did I miss B?
No, you're good. You're good. There is one touch point under roles and responsibilities we didn't talk about. So before we move on to the fourth and last point, I'd like to go just revisit that for a minute, because in our conversation so far, it may lead people to think that disciplines and scopes of practice are completely different. And what we know in the real world is there is overlap. And so one of the nuances to understanding roles and responsibilities is not just understanding the expertise and leaning on and trusting them for their area of expertise, but also navigating the overlap. So I've been in clinic contexts before where two or more of us are capable with our scopes of practice of assessing, diagnosing, and treating a certain condition. But it is inefficient and ineffective to have all three of us do that at the same time. And we had a conversation about who is going to own that work in this team context. It might be different in a different clinic with different partners who's going to own it. But today in this or as a standard of care practice in this clinical context, I respect and acknowledge we all could do it. What's the most efficient way to do it? And I'll tell you how we resolved it. This has happened a couple of times, and you can resolve it by you pick one person and that person's going to own it. And the others will just, add advice or consult or whatever along the way. That's a perfectly reasonable way to do it. The second is first person in the room owns it. And we did that. That allowed each of us to contribute in that area of shared knowledge, but we always made sure to bring it back to the team conversation before we created the shared treatment plan. And so it was most efficient because the next people to go in after we went in to see the patient already had that knowledge, that particular diagnosis done.
Okay, so if you're not a clinician, is this what you're talking about? Because if so, I have a thought about this. So if I'm not a clinician, so if you have people, I'm thinking, so like 2 or 3 people who are going to go into a meeting, and we're all kind of we're all kind of had expertise in faculty development. And we walk into a meeting and we kind of all look around to this person or group that has invited us to come and talk about or discuss something. And we're all kind of looking around here, and someone says to me, well, Kim, why don't you, why don't you lead the meeting? Or why? okay, yes, and it's kind of like improv. Yes, and I want to know if I'm going to be leading something or in charge of something. So I think what you said, we had a decision like first in the room or
Mhm.
someone's going to do it. You make some kind of there's got to be some kind of game plan in terms of,
Yes.
because again, back to emotional intelligence, I don't, I mean, I can do the improv. I can be spontaneous. I can wing it, but I'm more comfortable, especially depending on the stakes, uh,
Mhm.
that I'm prepared. So I have been in situations where someone says, "Well, Kim, why don't why are we here today, Kim?" And I'm thinking, "You're asking me? I don't know. Y'all invited me. Why? I don't know. Why are we here today?" And everybody's looking at me like with big doughy eyes, and I'm like, "Okay, game on." And I don't really appreciate that kind of a throwing something at me
Right.
fly. So how is that what you're talking about? And if so, help me out here.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think one of the beauties or one of the positives that comes from teamwork, whether it's in research, teaching, or clinical care, is the ability to plan ahead. I'm a big fan of pre-huddles before any educational event. I do a lot of trainings where we can clarify roles, responsibilities, and the flow of the event. I think the same is true in research circles. So let me give you a few examples. I've been on grant teams where we are preparing to write a grant. We're talking about it ahead of time. We're assigning different people to different sections of the grant, and there is inevitably places of overlap. So, two or more of our group of 8, let's say, can write this section. It is inefficient and ineffective to have us all write it and try and combine it together. We're going to pick someone, and then everyone else is going to edit. That's the same sort of analogy. Same for writing a paper, same for implementing. Let's say 6 of us have cell biology or cell capable labs. Uh, we're not going to necessarily keep all of the biological products in everybody's lab. We're going to pick one. And we need to have a conversation about which is the best one to pick, and is it the most central to where we all are, or how many people are going to be taking care of those samples, and the size of the lab, and all of that, right? We're going to have a conversation and pick the best one, even though we all had that space available to contribute to the grant. So navigating those overlaps require a team process that is inclusive, respectful, and has shared decision making. So there's more pre-work that happens with teams, but when you implement, the success is better.
Darn it, pre-work, wah, wah, wah. Wendy, pre-work sounds like work. And so many times, as you know, in our leadership courses, and we talk inevitably because leadership's all about relationships. And when you start telling people, you got to have the meeting before the meeting, and you got to have the pre-work before the work, and you got to plan it before you implement. People are like, ugh, that sounds like more work. Yes, and it'll save you on the other end if you do that homework before versus getting to the ball field and realizing, or getting to the gym, like I realized the other night, and you don't have your pickleball paddle, or you don't have your shoes, or you're ill prepared for whatever. It pays off. And it's annoying. And it's especially annoying when we're all so frenetic and rushed and busy. But that's again to the slowing down, to the like being mindful, taking a minute. We don't have to be rushing through life and everything 100 miles an hour. And if we just slow down and recognize, all right, what's important here? What's this? Let's use my wisdom and discernment in this moment, instead of just kind of tearing through and just doing it myself, or people schmeeple, it'll be fine. It's time
Right.
consuming and it's worth it, right?
Yeah, I really do think it's worth it. And that kind of brings us to the fourth item is team process. So imagine, if you will, there's a PI who sees a grant opportunity, uses an email, sends the email to everybody and says, hey, I would really like to invite you on this grant. I've assigned you a section, go. How effective is that versus having a couple of meetings, talking about the grant call, possibilities of what you could build together, and developing it together, and collaboratively deciding who is going to do what? The outcomes are better. with those, one or two pre-meetings than just a leader sort of in an autocratic way, assigning and asking people to do it.
Yeah.
It's a much better outcome, and you're more likely to get funded, just like you're more likely to save the patient or improve their health outcomes.
Yes.
So that team process is critical. And, there's a lot to understand in this sort of category, because it's not just on the front end with the pre-huddle. It's also, let's say you get the grant, or let's say you're long-term caring for this patient. You're going to have multiple team meetings. You're going to need to revise treatment plan or revise your implementation plan based on unforeseen challenges. And to do that in a collaborative, positive, team-based atmosphere is very different than an atmosphere of people who don't trust each other, who haven't worked together before, haven't built relationships, who aren't really sure that this is going to work out. It's just not going to lead to those outcomes that you want. Furthermore, not all teams start on this day and end on this day. What often happens is you start at a team and you add a couple of members, or, team member A gets recruited by some other institution, so you have to find a replacement for team A that comes in the middle. And the social sciences understand those departures of one person. The new person who comes in maybe has some similar areas of expertise and some different areas of expertise. The whole team has to shift in how they're utilizing that team member, how they're leveraging that expertise, when to lean on them, and when, unlike the first person, you can't lean on them for that piece. So it's a renegotiation of all those dynamics every time someone leaves or comes into this team. And that dynamic team atmosphere happens all the time in research and clinical care. And we have to really lean on that science to navigate it well.
Dr. Wendy Ward. Okay, so I couldn't wait to jump in here because I wish if we were out to coffee, I would have spilled my coffee, because I'm bouncing in the seat here because yes, because I was going to play devil's advocate. I was going to say, yeah, the pre-huddle, what do you think about this grant opportunity? Let's get together. Let's have about 15 meetings, being sarcastic, before we do something. And that strikes someone like me, the classic ENTJ, which means Myers-Briggs talk. I like to get her done. And that's at the expense of all possibilities. And I kind of just kind of run over exploring opportunities because I want to get it done. And I was about to say to you, well, Dr. Ward, yes, that sounds great. And that's good. And then after a while of getting to know the teams, moving, grooving, we're clicking, we're working well together, the wheels are greased. Then at some point, X months, X plus whatever in the future, it might make sense to go, oh my gosh, folks, an ROI just came out, an ROI, LOI, letter of intent, or an RFA, and boom, game on. Let's go for it. Wendy, you do this. Kim, you do that. Javier, you do this. Let's go. And everybody's like, yeah, because you were all, it's like a team, a sports team, where after a while, I imagine you don't need to rehearse the play or the call, because you just look at each other and it's kind of a wink and a nod, like, oh, I know where Wendy's going. She's going to juke left and she's going to go right up the middle. I know her. So I was about to play that card with you and say that's the beauty of practicing, huddling, getting to know each other. And then voila, we just kind of like wink at each other. We got a secret hand signal and we're moving. And I was going to play the other part of my, the other side, the other personality will go, well, wait a minute, Kim, you're assuming that those teams are stable over time. And then you popped in with exactly where I was going. Yes. So it reinforces the idea that teams are living, organic, moving, constantly regenerating. Even if it is the same person, people grow. Yeah. People change. People get bored. I don't want to be the biostat person on this. I don't want to do the program evaluation part of that. I'm tired of doing that intervention. I want to learn something new, let alone saying, hey, peace out. I'm going somewhere else. But I got someone who's just as, better than me. And then that person comes in and you're like, no, this person is awful. Or this person is completely messing up our team. So you hit it on the head, of course, as usual, Dr. Wendy Ward. Love it. Love.
So what's really interesting about the dynamic nature of those teams, they do still serve that function long term. There's the navigating changes kind of piece, but once you settle them, right, well, until the next change, long term, you do have the secret handshake. You know each other well, you trust each other well, you can jump into a project easily because you have done the relationship building and the culture creation and the team process ahead of time to make that happen, or renegotiated it as new people enter or leave the group. And I'll tell you, there is some research on retention of faculty member in the research arena, and having an established team or several teams that someone is on makes them very reluctant to leave, because you might get more money, more seed money, higher salary, but do you have the team that it takes in order to do the work that you want to do? And oftentimes people stay for the team.
Amen and hallelujah, sister. So you just hit on another very important topic that we know it's becoming more and more difficult. People are getting fearful that we can't recruit graduate students, medical students into academic health because of the challenges, how difficult it is. So this is becoming maybe, a forecast or, new trending disruptions that, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to get people into academic health? And you have hit on a very significant attractor and retention device, if you will, belonging, engagement, beyond, hey, how you doing, Dr. Ward? Getting any good papers, getting any good grants? What have you done for us lately? No, embedded and enmeshed in so many teams and flourishing such that we need you, we missed you, where were you? You are such a wonderful contributor. We would be nowhere without you. You're right. I could get offered double, triple my salary, but my people are there. And that's what's important to me. So yes. Team science, that's the way. Attract people, retain people, develop people, promote people, grow people. Everybody wins.
Love it. And I think in the collaborative care space, it's just as important, not just for retention, but also the stress of the work. So in a stress-filled, high-paced, fast-paced, high-stakes environment, having a supportive team in that, you're in the trenches in the clinic, right? Or in the hospital, to having that team around you to support you when the times are going good and when the times are not going good, is absolutely critical. And it is a reason that people stay, because they want to work with that team. And the better we can do as institutions to support the development and the deepening of those teams, the better off we are in maintaining our workforce.
Dr. Wendy Ward, nailed it again. How can people get in touch with you, Wendy?
Yeah, I'd say the UAMS one is fine. wward@uams.edu. Happy to chat with folks more about the team skills, team building, and how to build those skills for success.
Yes, University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. You're lucky you got Dr. Wendy Ward, and we are so fortunate that you have visited with us and shared with us. Thanks for being on the Faculty Factory podcast. See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Faculty Factory friends. It's Kim Skorupski here. Just a quick commercial for our upcoming Faculty Leadership Collaborative Mid-Career Boot Camp. We're hot off the 3-day Faculty Leadership Collaborative Early Career Boot Camp, where we had about 72 assistant professors from around the country and the world. Speakers included Drs. Susan Chubinskaya, Nutan Vaidya, Valerie Williams, Bob Tillman, Karma Fouché, Rachel Levine, Hannah Lundberg, Jennifer Haythornthwaite, Susan Matulavicius, Sonali Kandawal, and Kathleen Gamilla Crudo, Josh Polanski, and me. It was so awesome. Well, the 3-day mid-career boot camp for associate professors is April 9th to 11th, 2025, 2 to 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, all via Zoom. The topics for the mid-career boot camp will include Leadership Presence and Self-Management by Joe Losey at Pitt, Communicating with Emotional Intelligence with Alice Fornari from Hofstra, Leading Organizational Change with Susan Chubinskaya right here at University of Texas Medical Branch, Conflict Management and Mediation with Dave Usum from Hopkins, strategic thinking, planning, and negotiating with Reshma Jagzi from Emory, building and managing teams and projects with Wendy Bennett from Hopkins and Darpan Patel from the University of Texas Medical Branch, finances and funds flow with Vin Pellegrini from Dartmouth, and creating a leadership future, preparing for transitions with Archana Chatterjee from Rosalind Franklin. We're also going to have a panel of recently promoted professors who will share their journeys. You'll get 9 contact hours of CME, CNE, and CLS continuing education credits. You've got a curated resource guide, lots of networking opportunities. We have a half hour before, half hour after each day's events for just more community building and networking and Q&A. So go to the facultyfactory.org website. That's facultyfactory.org website. You'll find the link right there on the first page to sign up and share it with your colleagues and friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.